Shalom. Salakia. Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Harakakwadash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and the elders of GMS that rule well, and peace and citations to the elect of Yasharallah. Quick lesson, man, on a dream. I've been wanting to do this lesson for years. Just never really got around to it, man. Obviously, man. But I had this dream. Very vivid, man. Very vivid and spiritual, man. And at the time, I wasn't able to break it down, but because I was just coming into the truth. I just came into this truth at the time. And, as the years go by, I'm like, wow, man, I can't believe, I was able to decipher the dream or, pull out the meaning of the dream, because I could, remember that part of the dream very vividly to this moment right now, man. I won't ever forget it. But the dream is, I was dreaming, obviously, and I was in a classroom, and there was every nation of people, okay? They were wearing their cultural outfits, okay, like this, okay? Everybody was, it was all types of races and ethnicities and nations of people, man. They were wearing their it was modern day, but they were wearing their their clothing, their attire, that they wear. There was, Asians, Muslims, Elamites, Ishmaelites, Edomites, Hamites, okay, Japhites. There was Jacob in there, Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom, all nations of people, and different ages too. It was weird. It was different ages. It was kids, teenagers, adults, old, elderly, all right. And the funny thing is, they're all sitting down at a desk. Every one of them was sitting down at their own desk, okay. And the classroom was outside, on a road, in the middle of the street, all right. They were having class in the middle of the road, everybody's, so just imagine like a classroom, but the classroom is outside in the middle of the road, in a city, and everybody's sitting at their desk, that was, what was that, my last, it's like, yeah. They're sitting at like their school desks, all right. And the classroom was outside on a street in the middle of the road during the daytime. Like I said, there was all nations of people. Okay, let's go back. Okay. There was all nations of people and ages too sit, in this classroom. And the beautiful thing was they were speaking the Lashon Kodash, in reading the Bible, all right. They were speaking, the truth, all right, and reading the Bible, reading the scriptures, man, and speaking in the Paleo Hebrew, the Lashon Kodash, like I said, they were all nations and ethnicities of people, all right, okay, in this classroom, in different ages too. They're reading the Bible, speaking the Lashon Kodash, and then, they all looked at me, And then I woke up from my dream, you know. And they all collectively looked at me, you know, while they were still speaking. And I was just amazed. And then I woke up. And I woke up just like, what the heck? You know, I just thought it was a bugged out dream at the time because I didn't know what was going on. I did know that they were speaking the Lashon Kodash, reading the Bible, and there are different nations of people. And I knew that the Lord, at the time, I knew that the Lord was dealing with blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans. Those were his chosen people, the 12 tribes of Israel. But at the time, I didn't know, or I didn't have the full understanding of the speckled bird, all right, at the time. You know, and that's what that dream represents and symbolizes, the speckled bird, okay? Mine heritage, speckled bird. Jeremiah 12:9, it says, mine heritage is unto me as a speckled bird. The birds round about are against her. Come ye assemble, all the beasts of the field come to devour her. So when it talks about the Lord's, his heritage, all right, that's talking about his people, his chosen people. All right, it says unto him, unto me as a speckled bird. Okay, so what does that mean? The Lord's people, his heritage, are like a speckled bird. Well, speckled bird. Okay. This is a speckled bird. Okay. There's different species. Okay. And there's different shapes. You know. Different spots in different places. There's brown ones. Okay. Okay. They're different, you know. All right. There's a brown speckled bird species, dark brown, black and white speckled bird. Okay. All right, but they're all birds, you know, but that's how the Lord's people are going to look at the end days, okay? And why? Because the Lord, because the Israelites, Yasharallah, the Lord's people, have mingled, all right, had children, all right, and spread their seed amongst the heathens, all right? And we all know, all right, the bloodline, all right, of it, goes through the father, okay? So if a black man, for instance, as an example, has children with a white woman, all right, those kids are going to be Israelites, all right, because the man is an Israelite. And, even though the woman's a heathen, it's whoever the father is, all right, the father's bloodline. So those children, no matter what they look like, half white, half black, they're going to be Israelites, all right, because the spirit is carried through the bloodline of the father. They don't matter what they look like, and you're going to find out when they grow up, they're going to act like and be like Israelites and not Edomites, even though they look kind of like an Edomite and their mama's an Edomite, but their daddy is an Israelite and their bloodline goes back to Israel, Yasharallah. And if those boys, the sons, all right, or a son of that father, that Israelite father, all right, if that son has children with another heathen woman, Edomite woman or Asian woman or, whatever, his children are going to look even less like an Israelite, but those children will still be Israelites, okay? Because it's the seed, all right, the bloodline goes through the father, okay? The father carries the seed and extends the bloodline. The woman just bears the seed, all right? She doesn't carry seed, all right? So the spirit the spirit of a man, of a person, okay, is through the father's bloodline, okay? That's why you get Israelites likened unto a speckled bird. That's why you'll get Israelites, looking like all the other nations, All right. And you could tell, all right, who's an Israelite, who's not. Not just by looking at them, but how they act. Okay? All right? Because the scriptures say our people are the salt of the earth. Matthew 5:13, it says, ye are the salt of the earth. Okay? But, I'm just going to read that part. So our people, the Israelites, we're the salt of the earth. What does that mean, we're the salt of the earth? We're the flavor, okay? We're the best at everything, okay? We're the flavor of the earth, man. All right? When you look, spiritually look at the scripture, all right? It means we're the flavor of the earth. We're what makes the earth great. Does not the scripture say Jacob is the former of all things? What does that mean? It means the Israelites, Jacob, okay, invent everything. Therefore, we're the salt of the earth. Not just because we invent everything, we're the salt of the earth. We're the best at making food, the best at dancing, the best at singing, the best at, playing sports, the best at, making love, being lovey. How do you say, we're the best at everything. Hey, we're the most God-fearing, zealous people of the Lord on earth, man. The blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, we're the most God-fearing, the most, zealous out of all the people on earth, man. Okay. It's just in us to believe in God. Not all Jakes believe in God, but it's just in us to want to, but we're the salt of the earth, man. We got swag for, hey, that word's not even used anymore, but we got the it factor, man, okay? We got our way with words, all right, we got more strength, more, everything, man. Overall, we're better than these other nations, okay? Therefore, you'll get a heathen-looking person, but they are the salt out of that nation, They're great, like, for instance, Japan, all right? Who makes Japan great? Jake, the Israelites, okay? Amongst those Japanese, looking like the Japanese, okay? Walking after the Japanese customs, but they're the ones that make Japan great, making these animes, these movies, coming up with Godzilla, okay. All right, shoot, there's a whole bunch of type of culture. Shoot, there's Japanese people in there, in Japan, that act just like, that they wanna be black. They wish they were black, All right. They curl their hair, Okay. Hey, man, and that goes for every, nation of people on earth. There's outliers, All right. And really those outliers, they become cast outs, not cast outs, but what's it called? Where they push you out of society, not society. Outcasts. Yeah, they become outcasts. The outcasts of Israel, All right. Because, our people have a different spirit about ourselves. And you could tell, if that person's an Israelite or not. Not by their outer appearance, but by their spirit. That's why we get people that look like heathens walking by us out there in camp. But we could tell that they're Jakes, man. Just by the way they talk to us and they act. Because we had a so-called white man talked to us for like 30 minutes, out there in the highways and byways last week. And, he came off as a Temanite, because he was pretty smart for Edomite. But, he might be. But, hey, in my spirit, it told me to tell him that he might be an Israelite, man. All right, because he believes in God. He believes in God, man. He's really interested in the truth. He was really interested, man. No matter, we was rebuking him here and there, and he was still interested, and he was accepting the truth, the things that we were telling him, man. At the same time, he couldn't deny, what we were saying, and he accepted it, man. And I'm like, hey, man, he could be a Jake, an Israelite, all right. And, same goes with the Asians, Shoot, on the way to camp, one time, we drove by a church full of Asians, man. I never seen so many Asians in my life. It happens to be in my town that I grew up in as a kid, here in Wichita, Kansas. All right, I'm like, what the hell? Where all these Moabites come from, man? All right, I never seen so many Asians, in one spot in my life. I'm like, are we in China right now? Shoot, but hey, the brother brought out the scripture at the time. He was like, hey, man, remember, the Lord, he hid Israel, Jacob, amongst Moab, Asia. All right. So, and plus, you get a lot of Asians moving over here, okay? Because, hey, the Lord is going to judge them too, because those are Israelites, all right, amongst those lands, all right? The Lord put the spirit upon those Asians, all right, to come over here, all right, to make a good living and whatnot, because, hey, some of them are Israelites. And I grew up, I went to school with one, all right, an Asian, but, he had some flavor to him, man, some salt. The way he dressed, shoot, I copied off his style a little bit, man. I'm like, dang. And an Asian kid, all right. It's usually the other way around. Like, Asians copy it, Jake's style, but no, I was copying his style, man. At the moment, and because hey, he's an Israelite, he has flavor, man. All right, he was cool. All right. I didn't see him as an Asian. I saw him as, as one of us, All right, because our people, the Lord has scattered his people to the four corners of the earth, man. All right. What's a precept that pops into my mind? John 7:35, it says, then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go? Talking about Yahushua, that we shall not find him. Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? Amen. So in the New Testament, all right, it's talking about the what? The dispersed amongst the Gentiles. It says, but it says, and teach the Gentiles, and teach the Gentiles too. No, it's talking about the dispersed amongst the Gentiles, acting like the Gentiles, even looking like them, because they had children with the Gentiles, but they're Israelites. All right, just being called Gentiles, just like, you get a cat acting like a dog, or for instance, a person, a guy. Hey, men get called dogs all the time. Okay, but are they dogs? No, they're men. They're human beings. Okay, just acting like a dog, you know. All right. So you get living creatures acting like other living creatures and getting called by those living creatures all the time, but they're actually not that living creature, you know. All right. You can have a guy acting like a girl and being called, you know, he dresses like a girl, acting like a girl, looks like a girl, and he's mistaken as a girl and he gets called a girl, changes his name and everything. But that guy, that man, is a man no matter what. Okay? Same goes with Israel, Yasharallah. All right, you can have kids and disperse your seed, all right, amongst the Gentiles, the heathens. And then those kids look like even more like the heathens, all right? But they're Israelites because their father's bloodline goes back to a black, Latino, Native American Israelite man, okay? Okay. Romans 8:16, the Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of Yahweh. All right, simple as day. All right, so if that person, forget what they look like. If that person has the spirit of an Israelite, okay, you know, then he or she is an Israelite. All right, their bloodline, somehow, some way, their father's bloodline goes back all the way back to an Israelite person. All because their spirit is that of an Israelite. Because we judge the spirit by the spirit, do we not? Okay. You know, we have to walk by the spirit. Us men of the Lord of Yahweh Shemel Shai, we walk in the spirit, man. We judge people spiritually, not topically, you know, with their outer appearance. The Lord says don't judge a man by his appearance. Okay. Yeah, 1 Samuel 16:7. But the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance, nor on his height, on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. The Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord, Yahweh Shai, looketh on the heart, or your mind, your spirit. Okay? All right. So, IUIC, try to make everything black. No, man. It don't matter what you look like. All right? You're going to get Israelites looking like all the other nations. You're going to get Israelites looking like Asians. Straight up Asian as hell. You know, it's like there's no reason to say Asian as hell, but you're going to get Israelites looking like Asians. The other Asians, those other Asians over there, those darker Asians, you know, because there's a lot of types of Asians, you know. You're going to get Israelites looking like Hawaiians, living amongst the Hawaiians. You know, you're going to get Israelites amongst the Europeans, amongst the Russians, amongst the Africans, amongst the Arabs, amongst the East Indians, amongst the Islanders, you know, all right, you know, amongst everybody, man, okay. You know, like Apostle Har's been going into lately, you know, he went into the Scythians, all right, which were Jakes, but the Scythians, you know, they don't look like Israelites, they don't look like Jake, but they are, okay. Okay. You know, and how do we know? Because they're a very let's look it up. You know, they're like a very battle tested, you know, type of people. All right. What are the Scythians known for? Not KJV. The Scythians were fierce, nomadic, equi- equestrian, which means war, not war, but horse riding people, right? Equestrian, I think that's what that means, all right, which means horse, I believe, all right, and estrian, goes back, to the way you move, okay, horseback, all right, war culture, okay, all right, dominating, Eurasian steppe, renowned for their unmatched horse mount archery and intricate animal-style gold metalwork and immense, rich kurgans. Okay, says they were formidable warriors who repelled Persians. Right, and hey, if you were able to repel Persians, hey man, you are a very renowned type of people, because the Persians, shoot, like Apostle, I think Ramla, he said the Persians back in the day were called the immortals, because they're untouchable when it comes to conquering them. All right, they were barely conquered ever. All right, one time, you know. You know, the reputation for fierceness. They were viewed by settled civilizations as fierce barbarians, but were also skilled traders who established and at times fought with the Greek colonies in the Black Sea region. But the Scythians, all right, now are those I forgot where, man. There's all types of places in Europe, but they're very they're good at UFC and fighting. All right, but I forgot where in Europe. I think southeastern Europe, or around the Russian area, the Slovakian area, or something like that. Not Czechoslovakia, Slovakia. The Serbian, around there, around Serbia or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah. But they're Jakes. They look like white people, but they're Jakes. Okay. So yeah, man. One more precept. I'm gonna end it off. This is Acts 2 and 5. Okay. Going back to my dream. Okay. Seeing this in my dream. Okay. And they were all speaking the Lashon Kodash. All right. You're reading the Bible. Okay. Acts 2 and 5, it says, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven. Okay? Slack it. So yeah, man. All right. There was Jews, all right, out of every nation under heaven. All right. So hey, the Lord's people are going to be amongst and even looking like and actually, even keeping the customs of these other nations. Okay, but they're Israelites. Verse 6, now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speaking in his own language. Okay, and they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man our own tongue wherein we were born? Parthians and Medes and Elamites and the dwellers of Mesopotamia and of Judea and Cappadocia and Pontus and Asia and Phrygia and Pamphylia and Egypt and the parts of Libya about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Cretes and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of Yahweh. You hear that? In our tongues. Talking about what tongues is that? The Paleo Hebrew, the Lashon Kodash. Okay, because that's what the Jews, all right, okay, All right, what are Jews? The southern kingdom of Israel, okay? Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, which they were mainly black, okay? Complected, okay? And what language were they speaking in the times of Rome? All right, Roman persecution, captivity. They were still speaking the Paleo Hebrew, because was not the Lord Yahweh Shai, was he not speaking the Hebrew, the Lashon Kadash? Yes, he was. Okay, and I just named you. All right, it just said, these people that came from all these all these places, okay, amongst all these nations. In verse 5 it says, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem devout men out of every nation. Okay, Jews, devout men out of every nation. And it tells you every nation, and it says again, it says, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of Yahweh. And that's my dream that I had, man. All right, all these people out of all these nations, looking like the nations, all right, but they were speaking the Lashon Kadash and reading the Bible, okay, and doing which is what the wonderful works of Yahweh Shemel Shai, okay, and they were all amazed, and I was very amazed in my dream. It says, and were in doubt, saying one to another, what meaneth this? Others mocking said, these are men full of new wine, So, these Jews, unbelieving Jews were mocking them, saying, oh, they're just drunk, All right. They drunk on some other shit, basically. Verse 14, it says, but Peter, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said unto them, ye men of Judea, and all ye that dwell at Jerusalem, be this known unto you, and hearken to my words, for these are not drunken, as ye suppose, seeing it is but the third hour of the day. But this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith Yahweh, I will pour out of my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. All right. It says, and my servants and on my handmaidens I will pour out in those days of my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will shew wonders in heaven above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. Okay. So yeah, man. Oh, verse 21, it says, and it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name, not names, on the name of the Lord shall be saved. All right. So what's the Lord's true name? It's Yahweh, and his son's name is Yahweh Shai. It's not God. It's not Jesus. All right. It's Yahweh and Yahweh Shai, because that's how you say the Lord's name in the Lashon Kodash, the Paleo, the ancient pure Hebrew. Okay, if you want to believe that or not. If you don't believe it, all right, bye-bye. All right, go believe something else. Let's see if you're correct. All right, because we know what we believe. We know what we worship. Ye worship ye know not what. All right, and we can prove it to you. All right, just not in this lesson. Okay. All right, we could prove to you what your false names or words they use for God and his son and what they mean. Okay. So yeah, man.